Hello, and welcome to our iPad one-to-one parent orientation. We call our iPad one-to-one program our iPad one-to-world program because each student will get one iPad that will open up the world for them.
We don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are members of the human race, and the human race is filled with passion. Medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. To quote from Whitman, "O me, O life of the questions of these recurring, of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish. What good amid these, O me, O life? Answer, that you are here, that life exists, and identity. That the powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. That the powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. What will your verse be?"
Steve Jobs famously said at his last presentation that Apple is at the corner of technology and the humanities. We believe we are at that same intersection in career and tech education because we prepare our students for college and career with technology in the classroom and programs and humanities in the other classes to develop 21st century skills such as communication, collaboration, and creation necessary for them to compete in our global workforce. An obvious question right now might be, why would we do this? Well, let me tell you my story in my classroom. I taught math here for 19 years. For many years, my students had a traditional, and if they were completely candid, probably somewhat boring, passive learning experience at times. But all of that changed in 2011 when I got a classroom set of iPads. My students were no longer passive takers of information. Instead, they were active participants in their educations by creating information and knowledge through many varied hands-on learning experiences such as the one you see here. What you see here is I am up on the 50-foot lift dropping pumpkins, and my students are using their iPads to record the pumpkin dropping. On another day, we would go out and throw footballs. And the whole point of this exercise was for them to get the two recordings, use a couple of apps to determine and study the parabolic arc formula. And what they found was that dropping the pumpkin and throwing the football were actually derived from the same formula. The only difference is the football had velocity. This was a just rather novel concept before this, something they saw in a textbook. But with iPad, this hands-on experience, I was able to make it real for them. But not just in my classroom are we seeing a difference. What we have here at TCTC are teachers who have become experts in their fields because they have become authors. Our government department wrote an iBook textbook, an interactive textbook. We have one for our math department. And we currently have over 30 teachers authoring their own iTunes U courses. There's not a lot of this happening in our classrooms because students are actively engaged in creation. And when we started thinking about using iPad, we started thinking, well, when students come to TCTC, they tell us it's not like going to school, or it's only like going to school for half a day. Because when I'm in my lab working, that's not like being at school. What we wanted to do is how do we get that experience of working in all of their classes. And we thought iPad was the tool to do that. Because what it allows us to do is make learning an active state rather than just something passive when you sit there and absorb information. Think of your own experience as an adult. How do you learn best? By sitting or by doing? We know it is from doing, and that is why students come to TCTC, to do things and learn from doing things. We also know that the projects they do with iPad foster greater creativity and student creation, which creates better thinkers. Why else would we do this? Believe it or not, we do this to save money. Last year, we found we saved a tremendous amount of money because we no longer purchase textbooks. We're using a minuscule amount of paper, ink, copying costs, and other things that are used in a traditional model. Last year, we saved $55,000 from implementing iPad. Why would we do this? We do it for our students. When Steve Jobs and Apple announced the first iPod, they said it was 1,000 songs in your pocket. iPad is an infinite amount of knowledge. It is the sum of human knowledge in your hand and so much more. It's your son or daughter's entire school day in their hand.
Your daughter or son will receive a 64 gig iPad Air 2, a case, a charging brick, and a charging cord. Our cases are pretty good. They have a 5-foot drop rating, but they're not quite as good as a Survivor Griffin case, LifeProof case, or OtterBox case. If you would like the extra protection from one of those 3 cases, you may purchase one for your son or daughter's iPad. However, if you do decide to do that, please have your daughter or son bring the new case in with his or her iPad, and I will put it into the new case for them.
The documents that we had was the iPad loan agreement. I'd like to cover a few of the responsibilities. For the student responsibilities, I will honor my family's values when using iPad. What that means is, it's your house, it's your rules. If you say the iPad has to be plugged in at 9 or 10 o'clock for the day and they're done using it, then those are the rules. Students should not say to you, oh, well, you can't do that because it's a school iPad. I'm telling you now that's not okay. It's your house, your rules. And having him plug it in every evening in the kitchen is a good idea because we want to bring the iPad to school every day with a fully charged battery. The iPad is an amazing device, but if there's no battery in it, it's not so amazing anymore. So we need to make sure we have enough battery to get through the school day. I agree to use the iPad only for appropriate, legitimate, and responsible communications. Posting inappropriate things, cyberbullying, calling other students names is completely unacceptable and will not be tolerated. I will keep my iPad protected with a case at all times. They must stay in a case. And finally, I will keep the iPad updated. It is essential that your daughter or son keep the operating system and the apps updated so they can have the best experience possible. Here are some of the parent responsibilities. I will supervise my son's or daughter's use of the iPad at home. The best way to know what's happening at school and how they're using their iPad is for you to look at it. They will have to have a passcode on it, but they will tell it to you so that you can get in and look at what they're doing on their iPad. If they do not, let me know, and there are things I can do to help you. I will discuss our family's values and expectations regarding the use of internet, email, apps, and photos. It's your house, your rules. Their school email account will be put on the iPad for them to use, and there will be quite a bit of important information that comes to them through their school email accounts. So if you look at the mail app and you see a badge with a few hundred emails still unread, you might want to encourage your daughter to make sure they check their email. I agree that the iPad, the charger, the charging cord, and case will be returned when my son or daughter finishes school next spring. They must be turned in next spring. I will collect them, I will turn them off, I will store them, and next fall when they come back as seniors, I will hand them the exact same iPad. They turn it on, they update their apps, and they're ready to go. They get the exact same iPad back. This means that if your son or daughter does not turn in their iPad next spring, we have to assume that it is lost, and we will then take the full replacement value of $510 and send it out for collection. Parent supervision of iPad use is important, and communicating online in an expected way is important. We had a few issues last year. That is why this year
We have learned much from our first 3 years of our iPad 1-to-1 initiative. We learned that even some of the best students just cannot resist playing that hot new game or seeing what is happening on social media. Consequently, from here on out, students will only have access to apps that have been approved of and purchased by the TCTC, so as to give our students the best educational experience possible with the minimal amount of distractions. Students will now be able to get apps only from our school app store, self-service. Some students may be tempted to try and download games or free music from websites using Safari or Chrome. Do not do this. These sites are run by Chinese and Russian hackers, and they are trying to install something called a provisioning profile onto your device so that they can see your private data. So if you go to a site and it asks you to install a provisioning profile, tap Do Not Allow and do not go to that site again. Students, you can, however, earn bonus apps. If you maintain a 3.0 grade point average, have good attendance, which means 2 or fewer absences per 9-week grading period, and have no discipline referrals, then you can earn the bonus apps. Students will get access to at least 5 of the top student-requested apps. What are they? YouTube, Netflix, Spotify, 8-Ball Pool, and Threes.
When you're looking at your son or daughter's iPad, look in the upper left-hand corner. Circled are the letters VPN. If you see this on your son or daughter's iPad, this is a way for them to bypass your web filtering policies at home. We've had it happen before where students download these so they can stay on their parents' Wi-Fi longer than the parents want them. We've had some students whose parents set up their Wi-Fi that restricts their usage past 9 or 10 o'clock. The student wanted to stay on later than that, so they installed this VPN app to get around their parents' web filtering. So if you see this, it's time for you to have a conversation with your son or daughter. I'd now like to talk about another part of the iPad loan agreement, and that's the insurance coverage. In order for the insurance coverage to be valid, we need to have Find My iPad turned on. It will be turned on automatically when your son or daughter sets up their iPad. Families will not be liable for lost or stolen iPads during school hours, provided that Find My iPad is turned on, and it will be, and that it is reported within 30 minutes of the iPad being lost, and the iPad has at least 15% battery. If they report it to me within 30 minutes, and they have at least 15% battery, we will find it. We found every iPad that went missing last year. The reason it has to be within 30 minutes is I had one student come to me last year and say, well, I misplaced my iPad. I said, okay, when was the last time you had it? Well, I had it last week. By the time we went to look for it, the battery was dead. Fortunately, that student eventually remembered where he or she had put the iPad. And it has to have at least 15% battery so that we can ping the iPad. It makes a noise, and every teacher knows that when they hear that noise, we have a missing iPad, and they will collect it and then let me and give it to me. So we have to have battery in order for that to happen. Families are not liable for damages outside their students' control. Last year we had a student who had put his iPad down on a table. There were some other students not paying attention, and they knocked the iPad off and broke it. That was obviously not the owner's fault. So the other students that had caused the damage were held liable for the cost of the replacement. Families will be liable for full replacement costs for an iPad that is lost or stolen outside of school, or for an iPad with severe damage. This message is for both parents and students. Placing your iPad on top of your car as you're getting in to drive somewhere is never a good idea. Last year we had this happen 3 times. One iPad was run over multiple times. The other iPad was just lost because once it goes out into a field somewhere, we can't find it. If it's run over multiple times and so severely damaged, our insurance will not cover it and you will be held liable for full replacement value of the iPad. So placing your iPad on top of your car, or if you have a truck, on top of the back tire is never a good idea and will almost always result in damage. The final point in yellow. The insurance does not cover case, charging brick, or charging cord. The charging cord we found last year was the most likely piece to go bad. Animals love to chew on them. We had multiple incidents of cats or dogs chewing on the cord and ruining them. However, students using their iPads while plugged in with their charging cord can also ruin the cord as it gets twisted and bent. The charging cord, charging brick, and case are your responsibility. The insurance does not cover that. If any of those go bad, and we had one case chewed up by a dog, you are responsible for replacing it. One of the packets we sent home to be signed was the Responsible User's Guide. There were multiple sections on it. I'm going to cover just a few. Responsible use and digital citizenship. When we talk about responsible use, we remember that the use of the iPad is mainly for educational purposes. However, some limited personal use is permitted as long as it's not in class. Use of the iPad is limited to the student's individual account, and your son or daughter should never share his or her password with others. Responsible use would be using appropriate online names as well as the use of polite and appropriate language and content on all online posts. Examples of irresponsible use would be unauthorized use of copyrighted material called plagiarism. And I know it's easy when students are doing research to Google a topic, find their information, copy and paste it into their work. This goes both ways, because if a student hands something in that doesn't seem like they wrote it, teachers can also highlight the text or the information, put it into a Google search, and it will give that teacher the exact original source. Google has developed this specifically for schools. Another example of irresponsible or unacceptable use would be sending or posting electronic messages and or content that are abusive, obscene, sexually oriented, threatening, harassing, damaging to another person's reputation, illegal, or intended to bully. We tell the students, hitting post in any social media is like writing something in ink. It can never be erased. We want to make sure that your son or daughter are safe on the internet. That's why it is important for them to not share passwords with others or personal or inappropriate pictures of you or someone else. Cyberbullying, which is posting online something that denigrates somebody's reputation, threatens them, harasses them, or excludes them, will not be tolerated, period. If you engage in such behavior, you will lose your iPad for a set period of time. It is also important for you to keep your iPad clean. There are 2 products that will help you to do so. Most of the time, just cleaning your iPad with a microfiber cloth will be sufficient. However, there will be times where it gets a little dirtier and you will need some kind of cleaning solution. The product iClear, spelled I-K-L-E-A-R, is something that works great. You spray one spray on the screen and wipe it off and polish with the microfiber cloth. If you do not have access to that, misting some rubbing alcohol on the screen will also work. This is the iPad Pledge. This was also a handout that was sent home for you and your son or daughter's signature and review. I will just go over a couple of items from this. Number 6 says, I will ask permission prior to recording audio, video, or taking pictures of classmates and TCTC staff members. Number 3, I will be on task in class. This is very important. When we first got iPads, I would tell my students the best thing about iPad is that you can find out anything you want, anytime you want. The worst thing about iPad is you can find out anything you want, anytime you want. So last year we started iPad detention for students who could not stay on task in class. What that entails is a teacher would refer the student to me that had a problem staying on task in class. I removed the App Store and all non-school apps and removed the student's ability to delete apps. So the student had an iPad with school apps only and they couldn't download anymore or remove anything that was there. If your son or daughter has problem focusing or you're not happy with their grades and you think it's because they're a little distracted with the iPad, you can contact me and let me know, and I can put their iPad into detention for as long as it needs to be. Where you don't
This
think
app
that that's going
allows
to be as much
teachers
of
to
an
see
issue
their
this year,
student's screen, what the
because we have
student
a
is
new
actually
product.
doing live on the iPad at that time, to lock students into specific apps or websites to keep them focused on their schoolwork. Teachers can also take and AirPlay a student screen to the Apple TV in their classroom right from the teacher's iPad. It gives the teacher full control of the student iPad to direct them to do their work. We have found this app to be very powerful and very effective with our seniors. Here are a few tips and tricks for you and your daughter or son that should help make the transition to working with iPad easier so that you have a successful school. First, students should never take the iPad out of its case. The case is very protective and it's there to prevent any cracks of the screen or breakage or damage. Over half of the times where the iPads have been damaged have been from students taking them out of their cases and then dropping them. Before you go to set up your iPad, make sure you've created an Apple ID at appleid.apple.com. This will allow the setup to be easy and seamless for you. It is a good idea to carry your iPad in your book bag, backpack, or just a regular bag. However, dropping your backpack with the iPad in it and all of your books onto the floor will cause damage and cause the iPad to bend. In many cases, if the iPad becomes bent, it has to be replaced. Do not set your iPad on the edge of a table or a shelf. Many times it'll get bumped, it'll fall, and get damaged. Students, when you set up your iPad with that initial Apple ID at the beginning of the school year, that is the Apple ID you should use all year. If you change and create a new Apple ID, it will cause problems for both you and me. Do not set your iPad down and walk away from it in school. And just as importantly, never, ever set your iPad on top of your vehicle when getting into your car. This is never a good idea. We have lost multiple iPads from students setting them on top of their cars, and then they get a text message or a phone call and drive away with the iPad on top of the car. And it is either damaged beyond repair or lost forever. Do not do this. It is not a good idea. If you need to get in contact with me, this is my email address. This is the best way to get in contact with me. If you have any questions, you can contact me at that email address, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I thank you for your time and attention.